For decades, Marvel has published stories so unbelievably dark, so psychologically devastating, that they make even Game of Thrones seem like a children's bedtime story. But here's the thing. The Marvel Cinematic Universe gives us heroes who always find a way to save the day. But in the comics, Marvel has shown us what happens when the heroes face impossible choices, when decades of sacrifice lead to bitter defeat, when love itself becomes lethal, and when the very concept of heroism becomes a cruel joke. Before we peel back the dark layers of the Marvel Universe, please like and subscribe so we continue to make videos and do deep dives for you. Chapter 1, The Last Avengers Story. Published in 1995, but conceived nearly a decade earlier, the story asks a question that still haunts most readers today. What if the real defeat isn't losing the final battle, but winning it after you already lost everything that made the victory meaningful in the first place? The story opens up decades after the Avengers have disbanded, but here's what makes it interesting. They didn't disband because of some cosmic threat or world-ending catastrophe. They fell apart from within. Years of resentment, betrayal, and the grinding weight of the world that never stops needing to be saved destroyed them more completely than any villain ever could. When we meet the aged heroes, they're a hollow shell of their former selves, unable to face each other or their failures. Their legacy? A poorly ran franchise of younger heroes who get unceremoniously annihilated by a nuclear bomb while playing poker. The emotional core of the story is Hank Pym, not the triumphant hero, but a man defined by a lifetime of failure. He's desperately trying to cure Janet's fatal shrinking disease, an condition caused by his own Pym particles. Think about that for a second. His greatest scientific achievement is slowly killing the woman he loves, and he can't fix it. Ultron, the story's primary antagonist, also known as Hank Pym's son, is a constant reminder of his hubris. Every day, Pym is confronted by the catastrophic consequences of his own brilliance, and Pym must reluctantly unite the team. What follows isn't a triumphant call to battle, it's a funeral march. The most devastating revelation comes when we discover that their greatest enemy orchestrated their own downfall from within. By the end, the Avengers save the world one last time, but at the cost of everything they once stood for. The victory feels hollow. Sometimes the most devastating defeat isn't losing, it's winning while becoming everything you once fought against. Chapter 2, Incredible Hulk, The End. What's worse than death? Being unable to die when death is the only mercy left. The Incredible Hulk The End explores this horrifying concept through Bruce Banner, the last living being on a dead Earth. Humanity destroyed itself. Nuclear war, biological weapons, their entire species extinct. Bruce Banner? Well, he survived. The gamma radiation that created the Hulk also made him functionally immortal. While everyone else got the mercy of death, Banner is condemned to wander a dead planet forever. But here's where the psychological horror becomes truly unbearable. Bruce Banner and the Hulk want fundamentally opposite things. Banner is frail. He's a sick old man who craves the peace of death. He's desperate to die. He tries to starve himself and refuses to transform. Anything to finally end it all. But the Hulk refuses to surrender. Two beings share one body, locked in an eternal struggle. The story forces us to confront Banner's cosmic insignificance. He spent his entire life trying to cure himself, to separate from the Hulk, to be normal. And now that he's the last living human on Earth, none of it matters. There's no one left to save. There's no redemption to achieve. No purpose to fulfill. He's achieved a certain kind of victory. He's achieved loneliness. A victory more horrifying than defeat. This is a story about a man who discovered immortality isn't a gift. It's one of the cruelest punishments imaginable. Sometimes the real horror isn't dying. It's being forced to keep living when there's nothing left to live for. Chapter 3, Spider-Man Reign. Spider-Man The Reign is a story that takes with great power comes great responsibility and twisted to a nightmare. The story takes place in a dystopian future where superheroes have been outlawed. Peter Parker is an old man, completely broken, stuck in dead-end jobs that he can't hold down. When we first meet him, he's talking to Mary Jane in his rundown apartment, bringing her flowers and begging her to speak to him. It's heartbreaking to watch. The man who was once known as the heart of the Marvel Universe reduced to this. But here's the twist. Mary Jane really isn't there. She's dead. Peter has been talking to empty air, completely lost in his own grief and delusion. But the story doesn't stop there. It gets infinitely worse. We learn the truth about how she died. The horrific revelation comes when Peter cradles Mary Jane's corpse in a cemetery. She didn't die from a villain attack or from a superhero battle gone wrong. She died because Peter's bodily fluids are radioactive. She died from loving him. The same radioactive spider that gave Peter Parker his powers also made him toxic to the woman that he loved. The genius of the story is how it transformed Spider-Man's core tragedy. Uncle Ben died because Peter's inaction, but Mary Jane died because of Peter's very existence. And this is why he's broken at the start of the story. It's not guilt, it's not just grief. It's guilt so profound that it shatters his identity. Frank Miller's style, all harsh shadows and dystopian decay, perfectly captures a man trapped in his own personal hell. And the saddest part about it all is in the end, Peter gets killed. Sometimes being a hero means accepting that your greatest power can also be your greatest curse. Chapter 4, Marvel Ruins, a universe built on suffering. This is a universe where everything can go wrong and will go wrong. It argues that the age of Marvel heroes was a statistical anomaly. Ruins is a far more probable outcome. We follow this photojournalist named Phil Sheldon, the narrator of the original Marvels, on the final journey to document the horrific outcomes of the events that created the superheroes. In Ruins, Sheldon is weaponized against nostalgia. He's a dying man, cataloging a nightmare. During his investigation, he finds out Bruce Banner's exposure to the gamma bomb didn't create the Hulk, but a grotesque, ever-growing mass of cancerous tumors. The radioactive spider gave Peter Parker a contagious, flesh-eating virus. The Silver Surfer tears open his chest in a desperate attempt to breathe in a vacuum of space. No one is spared. Charles Xavier is President X, running brutal mutant concentration camps where Quicksilver has his limbs amputated. A deranged Nick Fury shoots a prostitute Jean Grey before committing suicide. By applying a sense of realism, along with some pseudoscience, when we're talking about the origin of heroes, the author of the series exposes their inherent absurdity. What the author is saying is these are the logical outcomes of these radioactive accidents. It's not empowerment, but cancer, disease, and agonizing death. The story ends with some dark irony. Sheldon discovers he's contracted the spider virus from Peter Parker and dies alone in an alley, his research amounting to nothing. Ruins just doesn't kill heroes, it kills the hopeful perspective through which we view them, arguing that proximity to these marvels doesn't bring inspiration, but contagion and death. Chapter 5, Immortal Hulk, The Door Below Hell. The series establishes a terrifying new status quo. Bruce Banner can be killed, but he will inevitably be resurrected at nightfall, to which he would become the vengeful Devil Hulk. This immortality is tied to the Green Door, a gateway to the below place, the deepest layer of hell. This realm is ruled by a cosmic entity known as the One Below All, a pure being of destruction, the dark inverse of the supreme creator deity known as the One Above All. This series is a masterclass horror. We see intense body horror with Joe Bennett depicting transformation as grotesque, sophisticated exploration of Banner's dissociative identity disorder. It explores a complex system of alter egos like Joe Fixit and Savage Hulk, each linked to specific childhood traumas. The most profound revelation repositions the Hulk from a scientific accident to the metaphysical necessity. He is no longer a simple curse. He's a necessary destructive principle in the cosmic balance of creation and annihilation. In essence, the Hulk of God. Sometimes the scariest stories aren't about external monsters. They're about discovering that you are the monster and always have been, and it was all by design. This section includes one of Marvel's most controversial storylines, not because it's profound, but because it represents the narrative collapses disguised as maturity. Chapter 6, Ultimatum. Ultimatum is a catastrophe endpoint of grim and a gritty trend of the primary example of torture porn in the mainstream of comics. The premise, Magneto driven mad with the grief over the deaths of his children, triggers global cataclysms, flooding Manhattan and killing millions. What follows is less a coherent plot and more of a series of disconnected violence designed for maximum shock value. Heroes don't just die, they're mutilated. Doctor Strange is constricted until his head explodes. Magneto snaps Professor X's neck. He rips the adamantium from Wolverine's bones and incinerates him. But the moment that defined the event's reputation, the Blob is shown graphically cannibalizing the Wasp's corpse. This prompts Hank Pym to bite off the Blob's head in revenge. The violence is so excessive that it's pointless. It becomes an act of narrative nihilism. Over 34 named characters had died. Ultimatum stands as the ultimate cautionary tale. It proves that darkness as pure aesthetics, without thematic depth, leads to nothing more than narrative incoherence. Proving a single poorly executed dark event can permanently damage an entire fictional universe. Punisher Max, the end, the final judgment. The story opens up in the immediate aftermath of World War III. Frank Castle, now an old man, survives the nuclear apocalypse because he was incarcerated in a prison. He is driven by one final mission: to execute the Cabal, the secret enclave of politicians and billionaires who orchestrated the war and retreated to a luxury fallout shelter to repopulate the Earth. Frank finds the bunker. They argue that they are humanity's last hope, only ones capable of ensuring the survival of the species. Frank listens, then methodically executes every single one of them. Faced with the architects of global genocide, Frank is presented with a choice: allow these corrupt individuals to rebuild the world in their own image, or extinguish the human race entirely. And he chooses annihilation. His decision is not born from despair, but from conviction. He's seen the depths of human depravity and concludes that the species is not worth saving. He condemns the world and executes the sentences. This is the logical endpoint of the Punisher's war. In a world where systems of power are inherently corrupt, the only pure act is total annihilation. Chapter 8, X-Men, God Loves, Man Kills. Chris Claremont's God Loves, Man Kills opens up one of the most brutal scenes in X-Men history. Two young children being murdered for the crime of being mutants. Their bodies left on a playground swing with a sign reading muties. This isn't a cosmic threat or a supervillain plotline, it's a hate crime tone for one of comics' most powerful explorations of religious extremism and prejudice. The antagonist is Reverend Stryker, who preaches that mutants are abomination in God's eyes. What makes Stryker terrifying isn't his power, because he has no superpower, but his messaging and his ambitions. He genuinely believes he's doing God's work. He uses language of faith to justify genocide. He transformed religious devotion into a weapon of hatred. But the story goes deeper than surface level allegory. Stryker captures Professor X and uses technology to amplify his telepathy, turning it into a weapon against all mutants. We see how quickly society's greatest protectors can become its destroyers. It's not Xavier's choice. His power is being weaponized against his will, but that's precisely the point. Good intentions and noble powers mean nothing when hijacked by ideological extremism. We find out that you don't need superpowers when you have propaganda. What makes this story truly terrifying is how faith is being perverted into fascism. Stryker doesn't see himself as evil. He genuinely believes he's doing God's work. His followers aren't monsters, they're ordinary people convinced that their hatred is righteous. It's a masterclass on how trauma can transform ideology and how that ideology can justify atrocity while claiming moral authority. The X-Men have always been about prejudice and civil rights, but God Loves Man makes it explicit and unflinching. It doesn't hide the metaphor. It directly confronts religious extremism, hate crimes, and the weaponization of faith. In our current climate, where we see ideology used to justify discrimination, this story remains devastatingly relevant. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't the one with the most power. It's the one who's convinced God is on the other side. In our final few chapters, we're going to explore alternate realities where single changes, one's death and one's decision, can transform one's world into a nightmare. These stories examine the butterfly effect of heroism and what happens when people who inspire hope are removed and despair fills the vacuum that they leave behind. Chapter 9, The Age of Apocalypse. What happens if the foundational hope of the X-Men is removed? Without Xavier, Apocalypse conquers North America. Inspired by Xavier's sacrifice, Magneto adopts his friend's dream and forms the X-Men to resist. The true darkness of Age of Apocalypse is a radical reinterpretation of the cast, exploring how their moral alignments are warped by this harsh new world. It's a brutal landscape, governed by Apocalypse's philosophy of survival of the fittest, where the weak are exterminated. We see some changes in our heroes. Magneto is a heroic leader. Sabretooth, traditionally a savage killer, is a noble member of the X-Men. Conversely, heroes become monsters. Hank McCoy, sadistic, the Dark Beast, a twisted geneticist who delights in torture. Cyclops winds up integrating into Apocalypse's regime. The X-Men are not a school but a resistance army, fighting a desperate war. The moral compromises and transformations shows us that the most steadfast moral compass can be warped by a world defined by brutality and despair. The event ends in a desperate mission to restore the timeline, effectively erasing this nightmare world in their own existence, so a better world might live. Chapter 10, Old Man Logan. The days the heroes lost everything. Logan's greatest strength has always been his willingness to fight for those he loves. But in Old Man Logan, that protective instinct becomes the weapon that destroys everyone he cares about. The movie Logan gave us a glimpse of this world, but Mark and Steve's original comic book reveals something far more psychologically devastating. The Red Skull orchestrated the ultimate villain team-up, but with a crucial tactical difference. Instead of each villain fighting for their usual nemesis, they switch targets. Mysterio doesn't go after Spider-Man, he goes after Wolverine, and Mysterio's power isn't strength or energy blast, it's illusions. Perfect, undetectable illusions. Using his mastery of illusions, Mysterio makes Logan believe that the X-Men's mansion is under attack by a massive supervillain invasion. Logan sees Bullseye, Sabretooth, and Omega Red, all his greatest enemies swarming through the halls, attacking the students, threatening his family. His training takes over. His instincts kick in. He does what he's always done, because he's the best there is. He goes into this rage and cuts through everyone and everything in his path. When the illusion finally fades, Logan discovers the horrific truth. There were no villains. The blood on his claws belonged to his friends, his students, children he was supposed to protect, Jubilee, Nightcrawler, and his fellow X-Men, dead by his own hands. Steve's cinematic artwork captures the moment of realization perfectly. The expression on Logan's face when the illusion drops and he sees what he's done. It's not anger or shock, it's complete psychological annihilation. Every nightmare he's ever had about a weapon, about being a monster, about losing control, they all come true in a single night. And that's why Logan refuses to use his claws for decades. It's not because he's old or tired. It's because the last time he used them, he committed the worst act imaginable. He became the monster he always feared, and he can never take it back. The psychological trauma is so complete that he literally cannot bring himself to unsheath his claws, even when his own life is threatened. Old Man Logan explores the ultimate betrayal, not by being betrayed by others, but betraying yourself. Sometimes the worst wounds aren't the ones inflicted on us, they're the ones we inflict on ourselves. That's not just dark, that's existentially shattering. While our main list covered the most psychologically devastating moments in Marvel, there are several other stories that deserve recognition. Their profound impact on both comics and culture deserve a mention. Days of Future Past, Marvel Zombies, and also Kraven's Last Hunt. If I missed or didn't mention one of Marvel's darkest stories, please go ahead and put them in the comments. Let me know what makes it horror and psychologically compelling. Later on, I'd like to do a part 2 and focus on moments in Marvel, such as Gwen Stacy's death. So there you have it, guys, the darkest, most psychologically devastating moments in Marvel Comics history. Stories so brutal and so realistic that they'll never see a faithful adaptation in the MCU. Keep your feet on the ground and your eyes on the stars. Excelsior, my fellow nerds. Kai out.